Let me be clear. I have never taken steroids or HGH.
That is still a legal question, and it's something that I won't answer.
Well, sir, I'm not here to talk about the past.
More or less, I was the only individual in Major League Baseball who used steroids. So that's hard to believe.
I'm here to talk about the positive and not the negative.
All of you have lied. All of you have said something wrong. All of you have dirt.
Let me start by telling you this. I have never used steroids, period.
Obviously, he knows I injected him. I taught him how to use the steroids. We've got to admit to certain things we've done.
I never took this to get an edge on anyone. I did this to try to get off the DL and to do my job. And again, for that, I am sorry for the mistakes I've made.
And Alex Rodriguez standing in that same spot today. So A-Rod adding his double shot of admission, some were saying last week admission light, to the body of work in baseball among those accused or proven to have used performance enhancers. Today, after Rodriguez read his statement, he answered questions for a half hour.
If your name was never asked, revealed in the Sports Illustrated report, would you have come out on your own volition?
You know, I haven't thought about that much. The fact is that it came out, and I'm here to, you know, share my story and put it out there, and hopefully I can put this behind me, and my teammates don't have to carry the burden of, you know, answering all the questions for me.
What's your cousin's name and who transported the substance from the Dominican to the United States?
Same person. I'd rather not get into who my cousin is. I mean, I'm here to, you know, stand front and center and take the blame because I'm responsible for this. He basically took an instruction from me and felt he was doing something that was going to be helpful, not hurtful. So, George, I really don't think that's relevant at this point, his name.
When you had your interview with Peter Gammons, why you did not disclose at that time about how you started using this drug with your cousin? This was an interview that you had arranged, and yet you didn't tell him about it, and you're only revealing it now.
Good question, Bob. The thing is, when a reporter came into the gym, just maybe 38 hours before, 48 hours, I thought it was important to come out and get the truth out there early and be forthright. As far as all the details, I didn't want to speak from a position of non-factual. I felt I was putting myself out there already with saying the truth. And over the last 9 days, I've sat down with my cousin and we've had several conversations. And here are the facts 9 days later. I wasn't prepared to say that, Bob, when I sat down with Peter, because I really didn't remember. It was a long, long time ago.
But you said you took it 2 times a month for 3 years. Basic math would make that 36 times. Why would someone inject something into their body a minimum of 36 times who is a professional athlete, wants to have a long career, if you don't know what it does, if you're doing it right? I just wonder if you can explain that.
Again, it goes back to being young and being curious. And when it started, it was probably in the middle of 01. When it ended, it was 03. And I realized, thank God that I realized after my neck injury that I was being silly and irresponsible, and I decided to stop.
Alex, you mentioned earlier you didn't think at the time that what you and your cousin were doing was wrong. But if you didn't think it was wrong, why were you so secretive and so reluctant to ask for assistance with what you were doing?
That's a good question. I knew we weren't taking Tic Tacs. You know, I knew that it potentially could be something that perhaps was wrong, but I really didn't get into the investigation, perhaps like I would have. I mean, I wouldn't imagine thinking of doing something like that today, obviously. It's a different world, it's a different culture. But again, when you're 24 and you're 25 and you're curious and you're ignorant, you know, there's a lot of things you really don't tell a lot of people, not just that. I mean, you don't want to share everything you do with the public or whatnot, and that was just one of those things that I really decided not to share with anyone.
Some of the questions and answers from that press conference. Now, Mike Paul makes his living advising clients about such situations. He calls himself the reputation doctor. All right, Mike. What was A-Rod's goal, and did he achieve it today?
Well, I think his goal was to try and convince us that he was telling the truth. I don't think, sadly, that he has really convinced us of that yet. You know, one of the big rules is that there are no ifs and buts in a true apology, and I still think that there are lots of ifs and buts. There were some great questions in follow-up after a statement, a written statement that was prepared for him, and every time he said, this is a good question, for example, that was giving him a little bit of time to think, because he needed that time to think, and he was uncomfortable with that question. For example, do you believe that you have cheated? Well, you've just said that you have taken a substance that you not only believe, but that the public believes, your own teammates believe, the league believes was wrong. It was an opportunity for him to get emotional. It was an opportunity for him to come off as much more repentant. He's using God even in his statements. Well, God wants you to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. So with cheating, for example, he had an opportunity to get very emotional and say, I cheated those players that are sitting right over there that are here to support me. And let those streams of tears come down his eyes. Don't fight them. We as men have problems with emotional intelligence. Guess what? It's an opportunity for you to show that a real man cries, that a real man doesn't hold back, that a real man is 100% honest, and he didn't do that. He should have looked in the camera and said, for all those kids that followed me, there's an opportunity for me to say, I'm sorry, right to you, into the camera. For Mr. Sutton, whose son died of using these substances,
Hooten.
I want to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Taylor Hooten Foundation, of
Taylor
course,
Hooten,
and Don Hooten there, of course.
Don Hooten, that's
there was
right.
we put a clock to it, 37 seconds, an emotional pause, but that was addressing his teammates. As far as the staging of this, the way it went down, if this was your client, what would you have done differently?
I would have told him, look, this was an opportunity for you to be much more emotional than you were. The reason why there's a lot of doubts is not only that you held back on telling us exactly how you took it and what it did to you, but we want to see your emotions. We want to see your soul. And he didn't do that. He tried to be very composed. When he had an opportunity to be emotional, he held back. And I think those are two areas that are really continuing to have a lot of doubt in our minds, and as a result, there are going to be a lot more questions that Alex has to answer.
And how well can you, we got about 20 seconds, how well can you put that off limits now as a ball player for the rest of the season? I'm not going to talk about it. I talked about it back in February.
There's no way that he's going to be able to put it behind him. He just put a price tag on trying to get some of those questions that weren't answered. For example, his cousin. For example, finding out how it felt, what it did to you. All of those things are going to still dog him, and he's going to have to deal with it through the rest of the season.
All right, Mike Paul, as always, the Reputation Doctor. Good to share some time with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.